Hey there, YouTube. It's James, and I'm back with I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist by Norman L. Geisler and Frank Turek. Today we'll be looking at Chapter 3. In the beginning, there was a great surge. And surge is all capitalized. It looks dumb. If I seem irritated, it's because today we're talking about, looks like Albert Einstein and the Big Bang or something. We start off with a quote from Albert Einstein. Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind. I am immediately going to go look for some context for that quote, because I don't trust it, but, you know, whatever. Even if it does mean exactly what it sounds like, would you rather be blind or crippled? I'd rather be blind. I wonder what Albert Einstein would say. Looking up the Google machines. I'm on Softpedia right now. I was just the first Google result. Yeah, okay. Going by this article, science without religion is lame, religion without science is blind. This is what Albert Einstein wrote in his letter to philosopher Eric, Goodkind? I'm sorry, I probably butchered that pronunciation. In response to his receiving the book Choose Life, The Biblical Call to Revolt. The letter was written on January 3rd, 1954 in German and explains Einstein's personal belief regarding religion and the Jewish people. It was put on sale 1 year later and remained in a personal collection ever since. Now the letter is again on auction in London and has a starting price of 8,000 sterling pounds. The letter states pretty clearly that Einstein was by no means a religious person. In fact, the physicist saw religion as no more than a childish superstition. The word God is for me nothing more than the expression and product of human weakness, the Bible a collection of honorable but still primitive legends which are nevertheless pretty childish. No interpretation, no matter how subtle, can, for me, change this, Einstein wrote. Yeah, I figured there was more to it than that. So that's what Einstein thinks. I'm just going to see if I can find if it talks about the context of that specific quote here. Yeah. Yeah, he wasn't really an atheist, but he didn't like religion, so... If I remember correctly, just from, like, some of the articles and stuff I've seen about him, he was probably, I don't know, closer to a deist? Is that what they are? They believe in a distant god that just kind of set the universe up to go without a non-interfering god. So yeah, anyway, got that quote out of the way. I had to look that up because that was something. I guess I didn't really get any context for that quote, but you know, I don't want to take up the whole. I don't want to spend an hour looking up a quote. If any of you out there know like, specifically what the context is of that, let me know, please. I'm very curious. Alright, start off the chapter here. Irritating, in quotes, irritating facts. It was 1916, and Albert Einstein didn't like where his calculations were leading him. If his theory of general relativity was true, it meant that the universe was not eternal, but had a beginning. Einstein's calculations indeed were revealing a definite beginning to all time, all matter, and all space. This flew in the face of his belief that the universe was static and eternal. Einstein later called his discovery irritating. He wanted the universe to be self-existent, not reliant on any outside cause, but the universe appeared to be one giant effect. In fact, Einstein so disliked the implications of general relativity, a theory that is now proven accurate to 5 decimal places. I'm sure that number means absolutely nothing to this writer. Sorry, I don't like these guys. I don't know if that's evident yet. I'm sure it is, but from their, like, truth and logic stuff in chapters 1 and 2, I really don't like these people. I'm still reading the book, and I'm still gonna sit here and I'm gonna think about all this, because that's what I said I'd do, and I guess... oh. I guess it deserves a fair look, but... I don't know, man. That he introduced a cosmological constant, which some have since called a fudge factor, into his equations in order to show that the universe is static and to avoid an absolute beginning. But Einstein's fudge factor didn't fudge for long. In 1919, British cosmologist Arthur Eddington conducted an experiment during a solar eclipse which confirmed that general relativity was indeed true. The universe wasn't static, but had a beginning. Like Einstein, Eddington wasn't happy with the implications. He later wrote, "Philosophically, the notion of a beginning of the present order of nature is repugnant to me. I should like to find a genuine loophole." So yeah, it looks like not popular, the idea of the universe having a beginning amongst the scientists then. It's common knowledge now, right? Big Bang and all. But back then it was all new stuff. By 1922, Russian mathematician Alexander Friedmann had officially exposed Einstein's fudge factor as an algebraic error. Incredibly, in his quest to avoid a beginning, the great Einstein had divided by 0, something even school children know is a no-no. Oh, that silly Einstein. Meanwhile, Dutch astronomer William de Sitter, once again butchering foreign pronunciation, I apologize, had found that general relativity required the universe to be expanding, and in 1927 the expanding of the universe was actually observed by astronomer Edwin Hubble, namesake of the Space Telescope. Looking through the 100-inch telescope at California's Mount Wilson Observatory, Hubble discovered a redshift in the light from every observable galaxy, which meant that those galaxies were moving away from us. In other words, general relativity was again confirmed. The universe appears to be expanding from a single point in the distant past. It's really cool stuff. I could geek out over astronomy and science. Just, oh my god. Anyways, that's not what we're talking about here. We're not going to go into that here unless they do. In 1929, Einstein made a pilgrimage to Mount Wilson to look through Hubble's telescope for himself. What he saw was irrefutable. The observational evidence showed that the universe was indeed expanding as general relativity had predicted. With his cosmological constant now completely crushed by the weight of evidence against it, Einstein could no longer support his wish for an eternal universe. He subsequently described the cosmological constant as the greatest blunder of his life. And he redirected his efforts to find the box top to the puzzle of life. Einstein said that he wanted to know how God created the world. I'm not interested in this or that phenomenon, in the spectrum of this or that element. I want to know his thought, the rest are details. Although Einstein said that he believed in a pantheistic God, a God that is the universe. Like I said earlier, from what I read, I was under the impression that he believed in, the cosmic watchmaker, God. Which is, his comments admitting creation and divine thought better describe a theistic God. And as irritating as it may be, his theory of general relativity stands today as one of the strongest lines of evidence for a theistic God. Indeed, general relativity supports what is one of the oldest formal arguments for the existence of a theistic God, the cosmological argument. The cosmological argument, the beginning of the end for atheism. Oh boy. I don't have high hopes. This argument has been around. It's not a good one. Don't be put off by the technical sounding name. Cosmological comes from the Greek word cosmos, which means world or universe. That is, the cosmological argument is the argument from the beginning of the universe. If the universe had a beginning, then the universe had a cause. In the logical form, the argument goes like this. 1. Everything that had a beginning had a cause. 2. The universe had a beginning. 3. Therefore, the universe had a cause. As we showed in the last chapter, for an argument to be true, it has to be logically valid, and its premises must be true. This is a valued argument, but are the premises true? Let's take a look at the premises. Premise 1. Everything that had a beginning had a cause. Is the law of causality, which is the fundamental principle of science. Without the law of causality, science is impossible. In fact, Francis Bacon, the father of modern science, said, "True knowledge is knowledge by causes." In other words, science is a search for causes. That's what scientists do. They try to discover what caused what. If there's one thing we've observed about the universe, it's that things don't happen without a cause. When a man is driving down the street, a car never appears in front of his car out of nowhere with no driver or no cause. We know many police officers heard this, but it's just not true. Oh, we know many police officers heard this, but it's just not true. Sorry, I didn't realize that was a joke till the last 2 words. It wasn't funny, but it was a joke. There's always a driver or some other cause behind that car appearing. Even the great skeptic David Hume could not deny the law of causality. He wrote, "I never asserted so absurd a proposition as that something could arise without a cause." In fact, to deny the law of causality is to deny rationality. The very process of rational thinking requires us to put together thoughts, the causes that result in conclusions, the effects. So if anyone ever tells you he doesn't believe in the law of causality, simply ask that person, what caused you to come to that conclusion? This guy is an asshole. I hate this guy. Since the law of causality is well established and undeniable, premise 1 is true. What about premise 2? Did the universe have a beginning? If not, then no cause was needed. If so, then the universe must have had a cause. I wish I had a more, a greater, vaster understanding of modern physics and, theory and stuff. Partly because I just love that stuff, and, I don't want or need an excuse to learn more about that stuff. But I also want to know more about it specifically for, talking about this kind of thing. Obviously. But it's interesting that he brings up causality after saying that, after pointing out that the beginning of all time was included in the beginning of all, matter and existence with the creation of the universe. Because causality is, if I remember correctly, quite dependent on time. So if time didn't already exist, it can be kind of hard to debate causality. You know what I'm saying? I know it's not an argument for or against anything. It's just, a fun fact here. Just something to think about. He's talking about logic and rules that exist within the universe, which didn't exist until it was created. So you can't really apply them outside, But hey, let's just keep going like we can, because that's where this is going. Maybe you can. Like I said, I'm not a master of the modern theory, so if you know about it, post it in the comments, shoot me an email, something. I want to know. I love that stuff. Alright. What about premise 2? Did the universe have a beginning? If not, then no cause was needed. If so, then the universe must have had a cause. Until about the time of Einstein, atheists could comfort themselves with the belief that the universe is eternal and thus did not need a cause. But since then, 5 lines of scientific evidence have been discovered that prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the universe did indeed have a beginning, and that beginning was what scientists now call the Big Bang. The Big Bang evidence can be easily remembered by the acronym. Oh, it's an acronym, Surge, S-U-R-G-E. In the beginning, there was a great S-U-R-G-E. Every several years or so, the major news magazines, Time, Newsweek, and the like, run a cover story about the origin and fate of the universe. When did the universe begin, and when will it end, are 2 of the questions investigated in such articles. The fact that the universe had a beginning and will ultimately die is not even up for debate in these reports. Why? Because modern scientists know that a beginning and an ending are demanded by one of the most validated laws in all of nature, the second law of thermodynamics. S. The second law of thermodynamics. The second law of thermodynamics is the S in our SURGE acronym. Thermodynamics is the study of matter and energy, and the second law states, among other things, that the universe is running out of usable energy. With each passing moment, the amount of usable energy in the universe grows smaller, leading scientists to the obvious conclusion that one day all the energy will be gone and the universe will die. Like a running car, the universe will ultimately run out of gas. You say, so what? How does that prove that the universe had a beginning? Well, look at it this way. The first law of thermodynamics states that the total amount of energy in the universe is constant. In other words, the universe has only a finite amount of energy, much as your car only has a finite amount of gas. Now, if your car only has a finite amount of gas, the first law, and whenever it's running it continually consumes gas, the second law, would your car be running right now if you'd started it up an infinitely long time ago? No, of course not. It would be out of gas by now. In the same way, the universe would be out of energy by now if it had been running from all eternity. But here we are, the lights are still on, so the universe must have begun sometime in the finite past. That is, the universe is not eternal, it has a beginning. A flashlight is another way to think about the universe. If you leave a flashlight on overnight, what's the intensity of the light in the morning? It is dim because the batteries have used up most of their energy. Well, the universe is like a dying flashlight. It only has so much energy left to consume. But since the universe still has some battery life left, it's not quite dead yet, it can't be eternal. It must have had a beginning, for if it were eternal, the battery would have died by now. Quick note, I'm just going to read through most of this. They're talking about, from what I know, from what I understand is, you know, this looks like it's going to just proceed with basics, not basic science stuff, but kind of common modern theory science stuff that's already, you know, pretty well established in the scientific community or whatever. So, unless I see something I really know is wrong, I'm just going to blow through this till they start talking about God or whatever. The second law is also known as the law of entropy, which is a fancy way of saying that nature tends to bring things to disorder. That is, with time, things naturally fall apart. Your car falls apart, your house falls apart, your body falls apart. In fact, the second law is the reason many of us get dresser disease when we get older. Our chest falls into our drawers. Our chest falls into our drawer. I think that was another joke. It wasn't funny. These guys aren't funny. I've read, you know, clever books by people. I've read like, you know, Christian books that had clever writers. But Christianity doesn't mean you can't be funny. These guys aren't funny. But if the universe is becoming less ordered, then where did the original order come from? Astronomer Robert Jastrow likens the universe to a wound-up clock. If a wind-up clock is running down, then someone must have wound it up. The aspect of the second law also tells us that the universe had a beginning. Since we still have some order left, just like we still have some usable energy left, the universe cannot be eternal because if it were, we would have reached complete disorder, entropy, by now. A number of years ago, a student from Christian ministry on an Ivy League campus invited me, Norm, to speak on a related topic. During the lecture, I basically told the students what we've written here, but in a lot more detail. After the lecture, the student who had invited me there asked me to have lunch with him and his physics professor. As we sat down to eat, the professor made it clear that he was skeptical of my argument that the second law requires a beginning for the universe. In fact, he said he was a materialist who believed that only material exists and that it has existed from all eternity. If matter's eternal, what do you do with the second law? I asked him. He replied, every law has an exception. This is my exception. I could have countered by asking him if it's really good science to assume that every law has an exception. That doesn't seem very scientific, and may even be self-defeating. It may be self-defeating when you ask, does the law that every law has an exception have an exception?
If it does, maybe the second law is the exception to that law that every law must have an exception.
I really don't like this guy. He's just like, ugh. I'm sorry. It's probably gonna start biasing me here in a bit, but I mean, he has like sometimes he has a point with the self-defeating argument stuff, but a lot of the time it feels like he's just giving non-answers.
He'd rather be a smartass than actually talk about it.
Apparently he gave a lot more detail in this talk. I wish he'd give more detail here. Oh, maybe not. Well, okay. Just because I like the physics stuff, though. I don't know about his professor. I don't know about that professor or whatever. I don't know. He probably had a lot. He probably had a lot more, like, you know, to what he was talking about than is being presented in this book. I get the impression these guys aren't going into a lot of detail with their stories about, you know, professors and stuff. But who knows? Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's just maybe it's just a dumb professor. That could happen. It happens sometimes. Instead, I backed off the second law for a moment and decided to question him about materialism. If everything is material, I asked, then what is a scientific theory? After all, the theory about everything being material isn't material. It's not made out of molecules. Without a moment's hesitation, he quipped, the theory is magic. Magic, I repeated, not really believing what I was hearing. What's your basis for saying that? Faith, he quickly replied. Faith and magic, I thought to myself. I thought to myself, I can't believe what I'm hearing. If faith and magic is the best the materialists have to offer, then I don't have enough faith to be a materialist. I want to punch this guy in his face. In retrospect, it seemed to me that this professor had a brief moment of complete candor. He knew he couldn't answer the overwhelming evidence in support of the second law, so he admitted that his position had no basis for evidence or good reason. In doing so, he provided another example of the will refusing to believe what the mind knows to be true, and how the atheist view is based on sheer faith. And maybe he was just being a smartass to the Christian because he didn't like him. I'm not above that. I admit that. I've talked to Christians before and just been a total, like, I've been a total jerk with the faith and the magic and stuff. I don't know. The problem is these authors have not given me any reason to trust them with their little anecdotes and stuff. They just feel dishonest, and that could just be my bias against them, because I've just admitted like 3 times in just this video that I don't like them. But you know, whatever. We're still going here. The professor was right about one thing, having faith. In fact, he needed a leap of faith to willingly ignore the most established law in all of nature. That's how Arthur Eddington characterized the second law more than 80 years ago. Big long quote block. The law that entropy increases, the second law of thermodynamics, holds, I think, supreme position among the laws of nature. If someone points out to you that your pet theory of the universe is in disagreement with Maxwell's equations, then so much for Maxwell's equations. If it is found to be contradiction by observation, well, these experiments do bungle things sometimes. But if your theory is found to be against the second law of thermodynamics, I can give you no hope. There's nothing for it but to collapse in deepest humiliation. That's kind of clever. Yeah, the second law of thermodynamics is pretty absolute, it seems like. Once again, I'm not a physicist. Oh, since I could see the professor was not really interested in accepting the truth, I didn't ask him any more potentially humiliating questions. Why hold back? I wouldn't. But since we couldn't ignore the power of the second law in our own bodies, we both ordered dessert. Neither of us was willing to deny that we need to replace the energy we had just used up. You're not funny! Stop telling jokes! Like, I get it, you're trying to be entertaining here. You're trying to, like, present, you know, evidence and facts and arguments and be entertaining while you're doing it. There's people that can do that. You're not one of them. This is, no, this isn't funny. I'm sorry, it's not. The universe is expanding.
Good scientific theories are those that are able to predict phenomena that have not yet been observed. As we have seen, general relativity predicted an expanding universe, but it wasn't until legendary astronomer Edwin Hubble looked through his telescope more than a decade later that scientists finally confirmed that the universe is expanding and that it's expanding from a single point. Astronomer Vesto Melvin Slipper? Butchering words again. Was hot on the trail of this expanding universe as early as 1913, but it was Hubble who put all the pieces together in the late 20s. This expanding universe is the second line of scientific evidence that the universe had a beginning. How does the expanding universe prove a beginning? Think about it this way. If we could watch a video recording of the history of the universe in reverse, we would see all matter in the universe collapse back to a point. Not the size of a basketball, not the size of a golf ball, not even the size of a pinhead, but mathematically and logically to a point that is actually nothing. I.e., no space, no time, no matter. Once again, no time. Causality relies on time, sort of. Like I said, something to think about. In other words, once there was nothing, and then bang, there was something. The entire universe exploded into being. This, of course, is what is commonly completely oversimplified into being called the Big Bang. Completely oversimplified. All the time. By everyone. I think I bumped the microphone. If you heard that, sorry. It's important to understand that the universe is not expanding into empty space, but space itself is expanding. There was no space before the Big Bang. It's also important to understand that the universe did not emerge from existing material, but from nothing. There was no matter before the Big Bang. In fact, chronologically, there was no before the Big Bang. See, now we're going to chronologically and causality. There was no before. What are you bitching about there needing to be a cause for something that there wasn't a before? Asshole. Hey, you're destroying your own arguments. The Big Bang, because there are no befores without time, and there was no time until the Big Bang. Time, space, and matter came into existence at the Big Bang. These facts give atheists a lot of trouble. I don't know, I'm pretty comfortable with them. Yeah, I don't know what caused the Big Bang or whatever. I'm confident that if it can be figured out, science will find out, eventually. Who knows, maybe it was God. I don't think it was the Christian God, if it was God. But I think we're going to get to Christian evidence later. I think first we're just establishing God. Creation. So, continuing on. These facts give atheists a lot of trouble, as they did on a rainy night in Georgia in April of 1998. That night, I, Frank, attended a debate in Atlanta on the question, does God exist? William Lane Craig took the affirmative position, and Peter Atkins took the negative position. The debate was highly spirited and even humorous at times. I wish this book was humorous at times. Partially due to the moderator... Oh, okay. There were some laughing moments, but not because they were making jokes. Remember, agnostics have faith that agnosticism is true. That may end up being my entire argument against this book. No one who prints that sentence has anything of value to say. Partially due to the moderator, William F. Buckley, Jr. Buckley did not hide his favoritism for Craig's pro-God position. After introducing Craig and his impressive credentials, Buckley began to introduce Atkins by cracking on the side of the devil as Dr. Peter Atkins. See, that's kind of funny. I bet that guy would have written a funnier book. One of Craig's 5 arguments for the existence of God was the cosmological argument, as supported by the Big Bang evidence we've been discussing here. He pointed out that the universe, all time, all matter, all space, exploded out of nothing, a fact that Atkins had conceded in his book and reaffirmed later in the debate that night. I hope we really get to the point of this, because I don't see how that proves anything. Like, I'm gonna set that up right now. I don't see so far how proving that the universe came from nothing proves anything. Looking forward to getting there. Since Craig spoke first, he informed the audience how Atkins attempts to explain the universe from an atheistic perspective. In his book, The Creation Revisited, Dr. Atkins struggles mightily to explain how the universe could come into existence, uncaused out of nothing. But in the end, he finds himself trapped in self-contradiction. He writes, now we go back in time beyond the moment of creation to when there was no time and to where there was no space. At this time before time, he imagines a swirling dust of mathematical points which recombine again and again and again and finally come by trial and error to form our space-time universe. Craig went on to point out that Atkins' position is not a scientific theory, but is actually self-contradictory pop metaphysics. It is pop metaphysics because it is a made-up explanation. There's absolutely no scientific evidence supporting it, and it's self-contradictory because it assumes time and space before there was time and space. Since Craig did not get a chance to dialogue with Atkins directly on this point, Ravi Zacharias and I stood in the question line near the end of the debate to ask Atkins about his position. Unfortunately, time expired before either of us could ask a question, so we approached Atkins backstage afterwards. Dr. Atkins, Ravi started, you admit the universe exploded out of nothing, but your explanation from the beginning equivocates on what nothing is. Swirling mathematical points are not nothing, even they are something. How do you justify this? Instead of addressing the issue, Atkins verbally succumbed to the second law of thermodynamics. He said, "Look, gentlemen, I am very tired. I can't answer any questions more." Oh. Succumbing to the okay, that's another joke. See, I can't tell because they're not funny. Sorry about harping on them, the jokes and not being funny and stuff. Like I said, they're not going over anything really that's a huge deal. They're just being jerks about something that they have the answer to this. And, you know, obviously scientists are still working on the creation of on how the universe came into being. So, yeah, there's a lot of, you know, just like vague theorizing and stuff. In other words, his decrease of energy proved the second law was at work. Atkins literally had nothing to say. Oh, yeah, whatever. Well, according to the modern cosmological evidence, the universe literally had nothing from which to emerge, yet when it came to giving an atheistic explanation for this, Atkins didn't really begin with nothing, but with mathematical points in time. Of course, one can't imagine how mere mathematical points in time could actually cause the universe anyway. Well, I'm sure you couldn't. Nevertheless, we wanted to press the fact that atheists like Atkins must be able to explain how the universe began from absolutely nothing. Why? Why do they have to explain that? Scientists are working on it. It's a work in progress. I'm probably going to come back to that statement just because... What is nothing? Aristotle had a good definition. He said that nothing is what rocks dream about. The nothing from which the universe emerged is not mathematical points, as Atkins suggested, for positive and negative energy, as Isaac Asimov, who was also an atheist, once wrote, "Nothing is literally no thing. What rocks dream about." Isaac Asimov, yay. I like Asimov. He was a cool guy. Really good stories. Big fan of Asimov. Sorry, I'm getting distracted again. I don't really care about any of this. For the most, we're talking about stuff that's, you know, pretty established, and then these guys being assholes to people. British author Anthony Kenny honestly described his own predicament as an atheist in light of evidence for the Big Bang. He wrote, "According to the Big Bang Theory, the whole matter of the universe began to exist at a particular time in the remote past. A proponent of such a theory, at least if he is an atheist, must believe that the matter of the universe came from nothing and by nothing." R. Radiation from the Big Bang. The third line of scientific evidence that the universe had a beginning was discovered by accident in 1965. That's when Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson detected strange radiation on their antenna at Bell Labs in Holmdel, New Jersey. No matter where they turned their antenna, this mysterious radiation remained. They initially thought it might be the result of bird droppings deposited on the antenna by nesting Jersey Shore pigeons, so they had the birds and the droppings removed. But when they got back inside, they found that the radiation was still there, and it was still coming from all directions. What Penzias and Wilson had detected turned out to be one of the most incredible discoveries of the last century, one that would win them Nobel Prizes. These two Bell Lab scientists had discovered the afterglow from the Big Bang fireball explosion. Big Bang fireball explosion. Once again, we're simplifying things to the point of sheer stupidity. I don't know what I was expecting, but... I kind of started out up here, kind of in my opinion of this book, and now we're just going, ooh, I have a feeling if it keeps going, we're just going to go... Know what I'm saying? I don't know. Well, let me know what you guys think in the comments, or shoot me an email, or whatever. I'll read it all. I'll probably make a video talking about it if anybody does comment. Technically known as the cosmic background radiation, this afterglow is actually light and heat from the initial explosion. This light is no longer visible because its wavelength has been stretched by the expanding universe to wavelengths slightly shorter than those produced by a microwave oven. The heat can still be detected. As early as 1948, 3 scientists predicted that this radiation would be out there if the Big Bang really did occur. But for some reason, no one attempted to detect it before Penzias and Wilson stumbled upon it by accident nearly 20 years later. When the discovery was confirmed, it laid to rest any lingering suggestion that the universe is an eternal, steady state. Agnostic astronomer Robert Jastrow put it this way: no explanation other than the Big Bang had been found for the fireball radiation. The clincher, which has convinced almost the last doubting Thomas, is that the radiation discovered by Penzias and Wilson has exactly the pattern of wavelengths expected for the light and heat produced in a great explosion. Supporters of the steady-state theory have tried desperately to find an alternative explanation, but they have failed. At the present time, the Big Bang theory has no competitors. In effect, the discovery of the fireball radiation burned up any hope in the steady state. But that wasn't the end of discoveries. More Big Bang evidence would follow. In fact, if cosmology were a football game, believers in the Big Bang would be called for piling on. This next discovery... Oh, damn it, that's another joke! It's not funny! Oh god, we're almost... Oh, thank god, we're almost done. Oh, oops. Said thank god. You'd be surprised how many people jump on your back for that if you're an atheist. It's just in the common parlance. It's just a turn of phrase. It doesn't mean anything. Yeah, thank god. Sometimes I get, be like, thank science. But, not usually. Thank God. Not relevant to anything, except just kind of the general atheism, creationism thing, but whatever. After finding the predicted, great galaxy seeds. After finding the predicted expanding universe and radiation afterglow, scientists turned their attention to another prediction that would confirm the Big Bang. If the Big Bang actually occurred, scientists believe that we should see slight variations or ripples in the temperature of the cosmic background radiation that Penzias and Wilson had discovered. These temperature ripples enabled matter to congregate by gravitational attraction into galaxies. If found, they would comprise the fourth line of scientific evidence that the universe had a beginning. In 1989, the search for these ripples was intensified when NASA launched the $200 million satellite aptly named COBE, for Cosmic Background Explorer. Carrying extremely sensitive instruments, COBE was able to see whether or not these ripples actually existed in the background radiation and how precise they were. When the project leader, astronomer George Smoot, announced COBE's findings in 1992, his shocking characterization was quoted in newspapers all over the world. He said, "If you're religious, it's like looking at God." University of Chicago astrophysicist. They're quote mining, and I hate that. University of Chicago astrophysicist Michael Turner was no less enthusiastic, claiming the significance of the discovery cannot be overstated. They have found the holy grail of cosmology. Cambridge astronomer Stephen Hawking also agreed, calling the finding the most important discovery of the century, if not all time. Did Kobe find to merit such momentous descriptions? Kobe was not only found the ripples, but scientists were amazed at their precision. The ripples showed that the explosion and expansion of the universe were precisely tweaked to cause just enough matter to congregate to allow galaxy formation, but not enough to cause the universe to collapse back on itself. Any slight variation one way or the other, and none of us would be here to tell about it. In fact, the ripples are so exact, down to 1 part in 100,000, that Smoot called them the machining marks from the creation of the universe and the fingerprints of the maker. I don't know. Maybe they weren't quote mining from that guy. Who knows? But these temperature ripples are not just dots on a scientist's graph somewhere. Kobe actually took infrared pictures of the ripples. Now keep in mind that space observations are actually observations of the past because of the long time it takes light from distant objects to reach us. So Kobe's pictures are actually pictures of the past. That is, the infrared pictures taken by Kobe point to the existence of matter from the very early universe that would ultimately form into galaxies and clusters of galaxies. Smoot called these matter seeds of the galaxies as they exist today. These pictures can be seen here. Can be seen at Kobe's website. These seeds are the largest structures ever detected, with the biggest extending across 1/3 of the known universe. That's 10 billion light years, or 60 billion trillion miles. Now you can see why some scientists were so grandiose in their description of discovery. Something predicted by the Big Bang was again found, and that something was so big and so precise that it made a Big Bang with science. Oh, I think they're trying to be funny again there. I don't care. I'm sick of their jokes. And I do want to take a moment here, just since they'll probably start talking about this, but with the exact precision of the stuff of the ripples or whatever that for the galaxies to coalesce and stuff, for us to even be here, and again with the distance of the Earth from the sun being so perfect to support life or whatever, I'm pretty sure that there's I'm pretty sure that's a pretty big example of I'm pretty sure I'm thinking of confirmation bias, where if stuff hadn't happened that way, we wouldn't be here to think about it, would we? Right? There's not really any way to say how common that would be. You can't just, go into a lab and create a few 100,000 universes for comparison to see the odds of, galaxies forming and life arising, or whatever. There's not really evidence that it could have happened any other way. If you understand what I'm saying, whatever. If you don't, that's okay. I clearly am not a good explainer sometimes. But if I'm wrong about that being confirmation bias, and I'm thinking of something else, or I'm just, outright wrong, shoot me a comment, let me know. And finally, E. Einstein's theory of general relativity. The E in the surge is for Einstein. His theory of general relativity is the fifth line of scientific evidence that the universe had a beginning, and its discovery was the beginning of the end for the idea that the universe is eternal. The theory itself, which has been verified to 5 decimal places, once again, I don't know that that means anything, and I don't think that these authors know that that means anything. Verified to 5 decimal places. Woo. Einstein made good calculations. He was a smart guy. I've heard that on looking at some of Einstein's equations, some mathematicians and scientists have been known to cry because they were so beautiful or something. If I knew, I'd go take a look at them right now if I knew enough, if I had enough background for them to mean anything to me. I wish I did. I wish I knew more. I wish I could help. I wish I could explain stuff to you guys better. Let's see. Where are we? The theory itself, which has been verified to 5 decimal places, demands an absolute beginning for time, space, and matter. It shows that time, space, and matter are correlative. That is, they are interdependent. You can't have one without the others. From general relativity, scientists predicted and then found the expanding universe, the radiation afterglow, and the great galaxy seeds that were precisely tweaked to allow the universe to form into its present state. Out of these discoveries, the second law of thermodynamics, and we have 5 lines of powerful scientific evidence that the universe had a beginning which we might say that came in a great surge. Alright, now that they're done with that, I'd like to say that, okay, I'm convinced the universe had a beginning. That doesn't prove anything in and of itself to me, so. Alright, God and the astronomers. So the universe had a beginning. What does that mean for the question of God's existence? Find out. The man who now sits in Edwin Hubble's chair at Mount Wilson Observatory has a few things to say about that. His name is Robert Jastrow. I keep running into his name. I still haven't decided how to pronounce it. An astronomer we've already quoted in this chapter. In addition to serving as the director of Mount Wilson, Jastrow is the founder of NASA's Goddard Institute of Space Studies. Obviously, his credentials as a scientist are impeccable. That's why his book, God and the Astronomers, made such an impression on those investigating the implications of the Big Bang, namely those asking the question, does the Big Bang point to God? Jastrow reveals in the opening line of Chapter 1 that he has no religious axe to grind. He writes, when an astronomer writes about God, his colleagues assume he's either over the hill or going bonkers. In my case, it should be understood that from the start that I am agnostic in religious matters. In light of Jastrow's personal agnosticism, his theistic quotations are all the more provocative. After explaining... See, once again, we're talking about scientists that have a very, deistic cosmic watchmaker view. And, yeah, I think right now we're still just trying to prove the existence of God before we get into Christianity, but... I don't know. These guys are already, trying to, influence you to think about their God when they really should just be working on proving a God at all. And they're taking all these quotes from guys that, you know, believe in a God that set the universe up to run and didn't, you know, do miracles and set people on fire and demand that we all do stuff and follow laws. In light of Jastro's personal agnosticism, his theistic quotations are all the more provocative. After explaining some of the Big Bang evidence we've just reviewed, Jastro writes, "Now we see the astronomical evidence that leads to a biblical view of the origin of the world. The details differ, but the essential elements in the astronomical and biblical accounts of Genesis are the same. The chain of events leading to man commenced suddenly and sharply at a definite moment in time in a flash of light and energy. The overwhelming evidence for the Big Bang..." well, we're done quoting here. "The overwhelming evidence for the Big Bang and its consistency with the biblical account in Genesis..." Have you read the biblical account in Genesis? The overwhelming evidence for the Big Bang and its consistency with the biblical account in Genesis led Jastrow to observe in an interview, "Astronomers now find they have painted themselves into a corner because they have proven by their own methods that the world began abruptly in an act of creation to which you can trace the seeds of every star, every planet, every living thing in this cosmos and on the earth, and they have found that all this happened as a product of forces they cannot hope to discover." And now we're in italics, "that there are what I or anyone would call supernaturals at force at work is now, I think, a scientifically proven fact." By evoking the supernatural, Jastrow echoes the conclusion of Einstein contemporary Arthur Eddington. As we mentioned earlier, although he found it repugnant, Eddington admitted the beginning seems to present insuperable difficulties unless we agree to look on it as frankly supernatural. Now, why would Jastrow and Eddington admit that there are supernatural forces at work? Why couldn't natural forces have produced the universe? Because these scientists know as well as anyone that natural forces, indeed all of nature, were created at the Big Bang. In other words, the Big Bang was the beginning point for the entire physical universe. Time, space, and matter came into existence at that point. There was no natural world or natural law prior to the Big Bang. Since a cause cannot come after its effect, natural forces cannot account for the Big Bang. Therefore, there must be something outside of nature to do the job. And that's exactly what the word supernatural means. The discoverers of the afterglow, Robert Wilson and Arno Penzias, were not Bible thumpers either. Both initially believed that in the steady-state theory, but due to the mounting evidence, they've since changed their views and acknowledged facts that are consistent with the Bible. I'm sure they acknowledge plenty of facts that aren't consistent with the Bible. These guys are starting to build evidence when they haven't built a foundation, really. Penzias admits the steady-state theory turned out to be so ugly that people dismissed it. The easiest fit for the observations with the least number of parameters was one in which the universe was created out of nothing in an instant and continues to expand. Wilson, who once took a class from Fred Hoyle, the man who popularized the steady-state theory in 1948, said, "I philosophically like the steady state, and clearly I've had to give that up." When science writer Fred Heron asked him if Big Bang evidence is indicative of a creator, Wilson responded, "Certainly was something that set it all off. Certainly, if you are religious, I can't think of a better theory of the origin of the universe to match with Genesis." George Schmoot echoed Wilson's assessment. He said, "There is no doubt that a parallel exists between the Big Bang as an event and the Christian notion of creation from nothing." I don't have anything to say to that. If that's what they want to think. There's not a lot in here that's really saying... Like, the quotes they keep getting are from people who, you know, don't know. I don't see, oh, the universe came from nothing in the Big Bang, so now I'm suddenly a Christian. I see, oh, God's as good an explanation as any. You know what I mean? There's a lot of spin here, is what I'm saying. I mean, I'm certainly putting spin on things myself, obviously, but... Yeah, these guys they just come off as so... arrogant, maybe? It's kind of funny considering how often, scientists are accused of arrogance, especially by, Christians and stuff. So, whatever. Maybe I'm just reading too much into it, obviously, but The Empire Strikes Back, but fizzles out. I think that was another joke. Don't drag Star Wars into this. Don't drag Star Wars through your mud. What do atheists have to say about this? We've already seen the shortcomings in the explanations of Atkins and Isaac Asimov. They start with something, rather than literally nothing. Are there any other atheistic explanations out there that may be plausible? Not that we've seen. Atheists have come up with other theories, but all of them have their fatal flaws. Which is why it's all still, a matter of debate, and scientists are still working on it. Science doesn't know all the answers right away. That's the point of science. You figure shit out. Science doesn't need to have the answers. It gets them, eventually. The cosmic rebound theory. This is the theory that suggests the universe has been expanding and contracting forever. This helps its proponents avoid a definite beginning, but the problems with this theory are numerous, and for those reasons it has fallen out of favor. First, and most obviously, there's no evidence for an infinite number of bangs. After all, it's not the Big Bang. Whatever. Fuck you and your jokes. I'm so sick of this guy trying to be funny. The universe appears to have exploded once from nothing, not repeatedly from existing material. Second, there's not enough matter in the universe to pull everything back together. The universe is constantly... I'm almost ready to just start skipping through all of this. It's getting old. We're not talking about anything... I guess we're not really talking about anything new to me, because I've read some of this stuff, so, I watch the Science Channel a lot. I love the Science Channel, the Discovery Channel, History Channel. Beats the hell out of Jersey Shore. Anyways, I'm sorry for that outburst. Second, there's not enough matter in the universe to pull everything together. The universe seems poised to continue expanding indefinitely. This was confirmed in 2003 by Charles Bennett of NASA's Goddard Flight Center. After looking at readings from NASA's latest probe, he said, the universe will expand forever. It will not turn back on itself and collapse in a great crunch. In fact, astronomers are now finding that the universe's expansion speed is actually accelerating, making collapse even more improbable. Third, even if there were enough matter to cause the universe to contract and bang again, the cosmic rebound theory contradicts the second law of thermodynamics because the theory falsely assumes that no energy would be lost in each contraction and explosion. A universe banging repeatedly would eventually fizzle out, just as a drop ball eventually fizzles out. So if the universe has been expanding and contracting forever, it would have fizzled out already. I don't know that that's true. Where would we be losing the energy to? I really don't know. If that's a real, criticism of that theory, let me know. Because I don't really see how you'd lose the energy from inside the universe to outside the universe somehow. Like the, entropic heat death of the universe, that makes sense with an infinitely expanding universe, because the energy just kind of spreads out as the universe expands, until eventually it's as evenly distributed as the energy can be. Finally, there's no way that today would have gotten here if the universe had been expanding and contracting forever. An infinite number of Big Bangs is an actual impossibility. We'll elaborate on this in a couple of pages. Oh, come on. Elaborate on it now. I'm getting tired of this. I want to hear more about God. That's what I'm reading this book for. I want to see evidence for God. I want to see evidence specifically for Christianity. You said in the beginning of this you're going to prove Christianity is, the one true religion. I want to see more of that. I want to see that. Let's get to that. Imaginary time. Other atheistic attempts explaining how the universe exploded into being out of nothing are just as flawed. For example, in an effort to avoid an absolute beginning of the universe, Stephen Hawking made up a theory that utilizes imaginary time. We could just as well call it an imaginary theory because Hawking himself admits that his theory is just a metaphysical proposal. Then why did you even bring it up? If Hawking himself, it just says that it's, just a fun thought, then why are you even bringing it up? You're trying to drag Hawking through the mud, and don't even bother. God help you. Stephen Hawking, Albert Einstein. These writers are clowns. In real time, he concedes. In real time, he concedes the universe has a beginning. In fact, according to Hawking, almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning in the Big Bang. So, by his own admission, Hawking's imaginary theory fizzles out when applied to the real world. Imaginary time is just that, purely imaginary. If he says it doesn't work, why are you bringing it up? I still don't get that. You're like, well, here's this theory, but the guy who made it says it doesn't work. So it must not be true. Well, duh! Uncertainty. With the evidence of the beginning of the universe so strong, some atheists question the first premise of cosmological argument, the law of causality. This is dangerous ground for atheists, who typically pride themselves on being champions of reason and science. As we pointed out before, the law of causality is the foundation of all science. Science is the search for... Yeah, don't talk about science. I've seen where this... I think I know where this book is going. And eventually, they're just going to throw science out the window. I might talk about it later, but science can't... okay, I'm not going to make it a blanket statement. But I feel that... I can't remember who right now. Wrote something that I found to be very enlightening. I don't know. Even if God does exist, even if Christianity is true, science can't allow for the existence of God. Actually, having said that, I may now have to explain that. Basically, what the person said was, science can't allow for the existence of God, because if you allow for the existence of God, you have to allow for the possibility that any experiment you perform, God or an angel or a demon or some other supernatural force could affect to their own ends. Thus, invalidating all of accumulated human knowledge. I may edit this out. An aside, people! I'm going off on a tangent because I don't care about this right now. We're not talking about interesting stuff. Well, we're talking about interesting stuff, and it's interesting stuff I already know about, and not in a context I find particularly interesting. Atheists attempt to cast doubt on the law of causality by citing quantum physics, specifically Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. This principle describes our inability to simultaneously predict the location and speed of subatomic particles, i.e. electrons. The atheist contention here is this: if causality at the subatomic realm isn't necessary, then maybe causality of the entire universe isn't necessary either. Fortunately for science, this atheistic attempt to cast doubt on the law of causality fails. Why? Because it confuses causality and predictability. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle does not prove the movement of electrons is uncaused. It only describes our inability to predict their location and speed at any time. The mere fact that we can't predict something doesn't mean that something has no cause. In fact, quantum theories... whoever made that argument? Whoever made that argument in any serious context, because that does sound dumb. All their arguments against atheists are against atheists that don't have particularly good arguments. So far. Maybe we'll get somewhere. It could get better. It might get better. I hope it gets better. Predict the simultaneous speed and location of electrons because our very attempts at observing them are the cause of their unpredictable movements. Like a beekeeper putting his head into a beehive, we must stir them up in order to observe them. Hence, the disturbance may be a case of the scientist looking at his own eyelashes in the microscope. In the end, no atheistic theory adequately refutes either premise of the cosmological argument. The universe had a beginning, and therefore it needs a cause. I don't know that we've established that it needs a cause. Like I said, causality is kind of a function of time, which didn't exist. But then, I don't know that that's a valid argument against that, so, against causality. Please! If you know anything about causality and time, let me know. The religion of science. Oh god. So why don't all scientists just accept this conclusion instead of attempting to avoid the facts and their implications with wild and implausible explanations? Yeah. Scientists are wild and implausible by nature. It's one of the things they're known for, being wild and implausible. Jastro's comments are again insightful. Remember, Jastro is an agnostic. Jastro observes, theologians generally are delighted with the proof that the universe had a beginning, but astronomers are curiously upset. The reactions provide an interesting demonstration of the response of the scientific mind. Supposedly a very objective mind, when evidence uncovered leads to a conflict with the articles of faith in our profession. It turns out that the scientist behaves in the way the rest of us do, and our beliefs are in conflict with evidence. We become irritated. We pretend the conflict does not exist, or we paper over it with meaningless phrases. The phrases we have seen used by Atkins and Asimov to explain the beginning of the universe, mathematical points, and positive and negative energy, respectively, certainly seem meaningless to us. Indeed, they explain nothing. Funny that you should talk about non-explanations. I'm going to talk about that later. Regarding Einstein's irritating feelings about general relativity... Okay, I want to say something here. God is a non-explanation for anything. God did it is not an explanation. God did it is meaningless. Something needed to cause the universe. God did it. That didn't mean anything. Self-replicating machine elves did it means as much. If that's all they're talking about, then like this is pointless, and we should just like skip to the stuff where they talk about, I don't know, the existence of Jesus or whatever, or at least to the next chapter, because God, I see where this is going, and I'm like trying to resist the urge to talk about it too much because I just want to get there and get it over with. Talk about it all at once, but Regarding Einstein's irritating feelings about general relativity in the expanding universe, Jastrow writes, this is curiously emotional language for discussion of some of the mathematical formulas. I suppose the idea of beginning in time annoyed Einstein because of its theological implications. Hey, maybe the Big Bang annoys scientists because it's really hard to figure out. Like, science is kind of about knowing everything, or as much as can possibly be known. And then you get something like science and scientific instruments and scientific theories have to exist within the universe, and then you try and look at something outside of the universe, and you can't do it. Maybe that's what bugs scientists. It doesn't have anything to do with God or religion. There's just something that they might not be able to know. That would piss me off. If I devoted my life to studying something and then found out there's part of what I'm studying that I might never be able to figure out, I'd be upset and maybe try and figure out, you know, a way around it. I wouldn't be doing it to deny God. I'm doing it to deny ignorance. Well, not ignorance, but, you know. You know what I mean. I'm making my point, I'm sure. Everyone knows that theists have theological beliefs. What's often overlooked is that atheistic and pantheistic scientists also have theological beliefs. As noted above, Jastrow calls some of these beliefs the articles of faith in our profession, and he asserts that some of these beliefs comprise the religion in science. He writes, there is a kind of religion in science. Every effect must have its cause. There is no first cause. This religious faith of the scientists is violated by the discovery that the world had a beginning under conditions in which the known laws of physics are not valid and is a product of forces or circumstances we cannot discover. When that happens, the scientist has lost control. If he really examined the implications, he would be traumatized. As usual, when faced with trauma, the mind reacts by ignoring the implications, and science is known as refusing to speculate or trivializing the origin of the world by calling it the Big Bang as if the universe were a firecracker. I don't know what this is about. It sounds like they're just talking about, like, you know, theories coming in and out of, you know, popularity being proven wrong. That's just a part of science. That's just how science works. Sometimes a lot of people are wrong all at once and they don't like it. Hey, science. Traumatized or not, scientists must come to grips with the implication of Big Bang evidence. They may not like the evidence or its implications, but that won't change the facts. Since the evidence shows that time, space, and matter were created at the Big Bang, the most probable scientific conclusion is that the universe was caused by something outside of time, space, and matter, i.e. an eternal cause. Oh yeah, an eternal cause. I wonder what they're suggesting there. When scientists stop short of that conclusion by paving over with meaningless phrases or refusing to speculate, it seems that they are simply refusing to accept the facts and most reasonable conclusions that come from them. This is a matter of the will, not of the mind. The evidence is objective. It's the disbelieving scientists who are not. What if the Big Bang Theory is wrong? So far we've given solid scientific evidence for the fact that the universe had a beginning, but suppose scientists wake up one day and find out all of their calculations have been wrong, there was no Big Bang. Given the wide scope of the evidence and the ability of the theory to correctly predict so much observable phenomena, a total abandonment of the Big Bang would be extremely unlikely. This is admitted even by atheists. Yeah, because that matters. Your religious stance totally matters on the validity of your scientific evidence. Yeah, the Big Bang is basically proven. That doesn't matter if you're an atheist or a Christian or a Scientologist. I just think it does matter if you're a Scientologist. Only because I'm not talking about Scientology. That's not what we're here to talk about. That is a joke all in it. It's its own joke. A physicist taught at the University of Hawaii once wrote that the universe exploded out of nothingness. Stenger recently acknowledged that the Big Bang is looking more probable all the time. We have to leave open the possibility that the Big Bang could be wrong, he said, but every year that goes by and more astronomical data comes in, it's more and more consistent with at least the general Big Bang picture. Indeed, in 2003, more evidence came forth that the Big Bang is correct. NASA's WMAP satellite, Wilkinson Microwave and Anisotropy probe, confirmed the finding of its predecessor, COBE, and returned pictures 35 times sharper than COBE's of background radiation ripples. In fact, space observation is becoming so supportive of the... Space observations are becoming so supportive of the theistic worldview that George Will uses. Soon the American Civil Liberties Union, or People of the American Way, or some similar faction of litigious secularism will file suit against NASA, charging the Hubble Space Telescope unconstitutionally gives comfort to the religiously inclined. Ha 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 ha. Yeah, sure, whatever. Supportive of the theistic worldview. You have not supported anything here. I want to make that clear. They haven't proven anything yet. Not to me, and I don't think to anybody. But nevertheless, let's play the skeptic's advocate for a second. Yeah, let's play the skeptic's advocate. Let's suppose that at some point in the future Big Bang Theory is deemed wrong. I'm not skeptical of the Big Bang Theory. I don't think anybody is anymore. Not really. I mean, the universe is eternal? No, for a number of reasons. First law, yeah, we're talking about stuff. First and second law of thermodynamics supports Big Bang, but does not depend on it. The fact that the universe is running out of usable energy and heading towards disorder is not even up for debate. Heading towards the second law holds the supreme position among all laws of nature. It is true even if the Big Bang is not. Second, the same can be said for Einstein's theory of general relativity. This theory, while verified by observation, requires beginning of space, matter, and time, whether or not it all began with the Bang. Third, there's also scientific evidence from geology that the universe had a beginning. As many of us learned in high school chemistry, radioactive elements decay over time into other elements. For example, radioactive uranium eventually turns to lead. This means that if all uranium atoms were infinitely old, they would all be lead by now. But they're not. The Earth cannot be infinitely old. Finally, there's a philosophical line of evidence for the beginning of the universe. This line of evidence is so rationally inescapable that some consider it the strongest argument of all. Let's call it kalam, from the Arabic word for eternal, cosmological argument, and it goes like this. An infinite number of days has no end, but today is the end day of history, history being a collection of all days. Therefore, there are not an infinite number of days before today, i.e. time had a beginning. To grasp this argument, see the timeline below marked in segments. The further left you go, the further back in history you go. Now assume for a moment that this line extends to the left indefinitely so that you can't see if or where it begins, but as you look to the right, you can see the end of the line because the last segment of the line represents today. Tomorrow isn't here yet, but when it gets here, we'll add one more segment, i.e. day to the right end of the line. Now here's how this proves time at a beginning. Since the line certainly ends on the right, the timeline cannot be infinite because something that is infinite has no end. Therefore, you can't add anything to something that is infinite, but tomorrow we'll add another day to our timeline. So our timeline is undeniably finite. That is a fucking stupid argument for a lot of reasons. For one thing, you're talking about a human perspective of time that is like, where you're talking in terms of like complete human constructions here with time and history and stuff. But whatever. I don't even want to talk about it. I'm trying to get through this to where they talk about what I know what they're gonna say here. I know what's coming up here eventually. Yeah, they're gonna talk about that, and they're not gonna be able to. Now, here's how this proves that time had a beginning. Okay, let's consider the argument from a different angle. If there were an infinite number of days before today, then today would never have arrived. But here we are. So there must have been only a finite number of days before today. In other words, even though we may not be able to see, as we look left where the line begins, we know it had to begin at some point, because only a finite amount of time... This is a fucking stupid argument. Only a finite amount of time can pass for today to arrive. You can't transverse an infinite number of days. This time must have had a beginning. Some may say that infinite numbers can exist, so why can't infinite days? Because there's a difference between an abstract infinite series and a concrete one. The one is purely theoretical, the other is actual. Mathematically, we can conceive of an infinite number of days, but actually, you could never count or live an infinite number of days. You can conceive of an infinite number of mathematical points between bookends on a shelf, but you cannot fit an infinite number of books between them. It's the difference between an abstract and concrete. Numbers are abstract, days are concrete. By the way, this amplifies our answer above as to why there could not have been an infinite number of bangs in the cosmological history of the universe. An infinite number of actual events is impossible. What we are saying here is that the universe, Big Bang or not, had a beginning. Excuse me, that is, the cosmological argument is true because both premises of the argument are true, everything that comes to be has a cause, and the universe came to be, so the universe had a beginning, it must have had a beginning. Thank God that's over. I said thank God again, but whatever. And now, finally, they're going to talk about something I actually care about. And who knows? Maybe this will refute one of my biggest arguments against their current argument's path. Let's begin with, who made God? In light of all the evidence for beginning of the space-time universe, the beginner must be outside the space-time universe. When God is suggested as beginner, atheists are quick to ask the age-old question, then who made God? If everything needs a cause, then God needs a cause too. I know, right? That's one of my favorite things to ask. As we've seen, the law of causality is the very foundation of science. Science is a search for causes, and that search is based on our consistent observation that everything that has a beginning has a cause. In fact, the question, who made God, points out how seriously we take the law of causality. It's taken for granted that virtually everything needs a cause. So why then doesn't God need a cause? Because the atheist contention misunderstands the law of causality. Yeah, I'm sure the atheists misunderstand causality. The law of causality does not say that everything needs a cause. It says that everything that comes to be needs a cause. God did not come to be. No one made God. He is unmade. As an eternal being, God did not have a beginning, so he didn't need a cause. But wait, the atheist will protest. If you can have an eternal God, then I can have an eternal universe. After all, if the universe is eternal, then it did not have a cause. Yes, it is logically possible that the universe is eternal, and therefore didn't have a cause. In fact, it is one of only two possibilities. Either the universe or something outside the universe is eternal. Since something undeniably exists today, then something must have always existed. We have only two choices, the universe or something that caused the universe. The problem for the atheist is that while it is logically possible that the universe is eternal, it does not seem to be actually possible. For all the scientific and philosophical evidence, surge, radioactive decay, and tells us the universe cannot be eternal. So by ruling out one of the two options, we are left with only one other option. Something outside the universe is eternal. I still don't see any evidence for God, or even that that's necessarily true. Because once again, we're talking about stuff that's outside the universe, trying to apply logic from within the universe. When you get right down to it, there are only two possibilities for anything that exists. Either one, it has always existed and is therefore uncaused, or two, it had a beginning and was caused by something else. It can't be self-caused because it would have had to exist already in order to cause anything. Actually, I think there's some really interesting stuff about, like, closed time loops and stuff that... sorry. I've read some really good books on time travel and stuff. It's really fun stuff. It's way more interesting than this, and actually a couple of the books I read have way, more entertaining authors. According to the overwhelming evidence, the universe had a beginning, so it must be caused by something else, by something outside itself. Notice that this conclusion is consistent with theistic religion, but is not based on those religions, based on good reason and evidence. So what is this first cause like? One might think you need to rely on a Bible or some other so-called religious revelation to answer that question. But again, we don't need anyone's scripture to figure that out. Einstein was right when he said, science without religion is lame, religion without science is blind. So blind. Religion can be informed and confirmed by science, as it is by the cosmological argument. Namely, we can discover some characteristics of the first cause just from the evidence we've discussed. The first cause must be self-existent, timeless, non-spatial, and immaterial. Since the first cause created time, space, and matter, the first cause must be outside of time, space, and matter. In other words, he is without limits or infinite, unimaginably powerful to create the universe out of nothing, supremely intelligent to design the universe with such incredible precision. We'll see more of this in the next chapter. Personal, in order to choose to convert a state of nothingness into the time-space material universe. An impersonal force has no ability to make choices. I don't know what implies a choice. Actually, they haven't talked about anything that implied a choice. Maybe there is a super powerful force that exists outside of time, space, and matter that is driven by its own set of natural laws, clearly different from ours, being outside of ours. That caused it to just create the universe or whatever. It's you can't use this as proof of anything because it's all just wild speculation. It's the wild speculation and stuff that you're accusing scientists of doing with their points of mathematics and stuff. The infinite mathematical points bubbling around or whatever makes just as much sense so far. These characteristics of the first cause are exactly the characteristics theists ascribe to God. Again, these characteristics are not based on someone's religion or subjective experience, except the personal thing, and the intelligence thing. What's the intelligence thing? Yeah. the personal thing and the intelligence thing, you haven't really proved that. So, you know, whatever. We are drawn from the scientific evidence we've just reviewed that help us see a critically important info box topic called life. Conclusion: if there is no God, why is there something rather than nothing? Years ago, I, Norm, debated an atheist at the University of Miami on the question, does God exist? After I presented much of the evidence we've reviewed here, I had the opportunity to ask my opponent some questions. Here's what I asked him. Sir, I have some questions for you. First, if there is no God, why is there something rather than nothing at all? I then proceeded to ask a few more questions, thinking he would answer them in sequence. Now, usually when you debate someone, you're trying to persuade the audience. You don't expect to get your opponent to admit he's wrong. He's got too much invested in the position, and most debaters have too much ego to admit an error. But this guy was different. He surprised me when he said, regarding the first question, that's a good question. That's a really good question. Without any other comment, he went on to answer my second question. After hearing the evidence for the existence of God, this debater was left questioning his own beliefs. Was he? He even attended a follow-up meeting and, expressed he had doubts about atheism. His faith in atheism was waning indeed. If there is no God, why is there something rather than nothing? Is a question that we all have to answer. And in light of the evidence, we are left with only two options. Either no one created something out of nothing, or else someone created something out of nothing. Which view is more reasonable? Nothing created something? No. Nothing created something? No. Even Julie Andrews knew this answer when she's saying nothing comes from nothing, nothing ever could. Yeah, singers, they know all about physics and, cosmology and religion. And if you can't believe that nothing caused something, then you don't have enough faith to be an atheist. The most reasonable view is God. Robert Jastrow suggested this when he ended his book, God and the Astronomers with the Class Sublime. For the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance. He's about to conquer the highest peak. As he pulls himself over the final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries. And that concludes Chapter 3. And fuck me, was it just pointless and stupid? They haven't presented evidence for God. They have observed the universe began, and that it's likely that something from just what they presented, it's likely that something outside of our time-space material universe caused our time-space material universe to come into existence. That's it. Those two things have no real evidence for God. I've talked about it a little. Yeah, Big Bang. It's accepted theory. It's basically proven theory. Science doesn't know how it came into being. Science may never know how it came into being. They're working on it as hard as they can because it's an important question, and scientists want to know. They're not, denying religion. I guess some of them are, obviously. Denying God or whatever. I'm denying God still. The book hasn't made its case to me yet. But we're only 3 chapters in, so I don't really look forward to reading more. I don't think it's going to get any better than this. I looked over, the table of contents and stuff. It might be their best argument. So, yeah. And then something outside of time, space, whatever, caused our universe to exist. There's no proof of intelligence, but they promised to talk about that in the next chapter. They're probably going to go with the what I think was the watchmaker argument, which is just a bad argument in general. But yeah, we're talking about God doesn't need a cause because he existed forever. Whatever. That infinite days thing is stupid too. Like I said, that's completely from the human viewpoint of time. God help you. Freaking time. Anyways. So yeah, that's chapter 3. It was kind of painful. Boring. Once again, just talking about stuff. For the mostly you're just attaching unbased conclusions onto stuff that's generally true. They're also quote mining scientists for, you know, stuff that sounds like it says something about God when it doesn't. I'm mad. I'm trying not to let it cloud my judgment, but this is just frustrating. These guys, I really think these guys are clowns. The worst part is, if I actually met one of them and talked to them, they could probably argue me into a corner. Debate me off a cliff. Just because I don't have the background. Not that I think they have the background. I'm still not convinced they understand some of the stuff they're talking about. I need a team of scientists with me at all times. Oh, I don't know. I'm not convinced. I'm not happy. I'll see you next time with Chapter 4. Oh boy. But yeah. Oh. Leave comments. Sorry, I bumped the microphone again. Don't know if you heard that. Comments and stuff. Send them email, send them messages, send them. I want to hear what you have to say. I want to hear what I'm wrong about. I wouldn't mind hearing what I'm right about either, but I'd much rather know what I'm wrong about. And I'd certainly love some elaboration on some of the stuff I asked you guys to explain to me. So, yeah, that's it for today. We'll see you guys next time with Chapter 4, titled Divine Design. Yeah, I'm fully expecting the watchmaker argument. Alright, bye guys.